Have you ever damaged a tomato plant? And I mean really damaged it to the point to where it seemed like it was completely done for? Well, chances are not all hope is lost. Here's how I brought back some of my damaged tomato plants in just 2.5 weeks. If you're like me, you love growing tomatoes. And just a couple weeks ago, I was sure I had destroyed some of mine. We had a particularly rainy night, and I needed to move my tomatoes from the bins that they had been sitting in so that they wouldn't drown. In my haste, I moved some of them too quickly, not accounting for how top heavy they'd gotten, and snapped them right at the base. It was awful. I was so disappointed. I'm growing lots of tomatoes this year. I started 9 different varieties from seed, rescued them from pretty overwhelming legginess, potted them up as they outgrew their original pots, and hardened them off, setting up a promising growing season. And it didn't matter to me that I had plenty of plants to spare. I was going to save these damaged tomato plants. As soon as I saw what happened, I took action. This was an emergency. First plant had completely snapped off. All I needed to do was get my shears and create a clean cut at the end and remove a decent bit of foliage. You see, tomato stems are super cool. They want to grow even if they've been separated from their main root system. These little bumps on the tomato stem are called adventitious roots. When put into contact with moisture, soil, and warmth, these will actually take root, generating straight from the tomato stem. It's one of the reasons you hear about being able to bury your tomato plants a little bit more deeply when you transplant them into the garden bed. The adventitious roots will emerge and take hold in the soil. So I took advantage of this. The plant wasn't dead, and it probably didn't even realize yet that it had been severely damaged. So I trimmed it up, I removed the old root ball, which was now of course not going to be of any use, and replanted the stem just about as deeply as I could in the pot. This ensured good stem contact with the soil, allowing for as many roots to develop as possible. And then I went to work on the other plant. This one had basically just folded at the base. So I took my shears and I created a clean cut to remove it completely from its former root system. Again, I removed much of the foliage, leaving just enough at the top so the plant could continue to photosynthesize. I removed the root ball, I popped the freshly cut stem into the pot as deeply as I could, and I refilled with potting soil. And then the waiting game started. Now, you could also do this in a jar or in a vase filled with water. Just take your freshly cut stem and put it in the water and let the roots start to develop. Once they've gotten a little bit further along, you can remove the stem and you can plant the plant into a pot with soil so the root system can continue to grow. After repotting, I gave them some water and I set them on the patio steps out of too much wind. At this point, I probably also should have put them somewhere that didn't get full sun. This part of the garden is south facing, which means that it gets sun all day long. These plants would have been better off if I would have initially given them maybe a little bit of afternoon shade. These plants were already stressed enough. And a day or two later, the stress was really showing. The stems were no longer rigid and the plants were floppy and sad. Now, I knew that this wasn't something I needed to be overly concerned with, because this really just looked like classic transplant shock, and tomatoes can get very dramatic, even if they haven't been fully separated from their main root. But I also didn't want the plants to bend too much on top of themselves, and I certainly didn't want their stems to snap again. So I did another thing that I should have done at the outset, and I staked them. I took a couple pieces of bamboo, pushed them into the soil, and attached the plants to the bamboo with some garden twine. I made a figure-8 loop so the plants could still move around a little bit, which would be good for them to build up strength. They still looked sad, but at least now they had some support. And then I did what I should have done initially, and I moved them to the east side of the house, where they would only be exposed to about 4 or 5 hours of sun per day. And then I watered, watched, and waited. After about a week, the plants perked up nicely. Now, I wasn't going to mess with them too much, but it was clear to me that something good was happening beneath the soil's surface. At this point, I also went ahead and removed any flower buds on the plants. I didn't want the plants to focus on fruit production at this point. This was all about building strong, healthy roots. But they were looking great. tons of progress, and I was absolutely confident that the roots were developing nicely and taking hold. Now it's been 2.5 weeks since these plants were at death's door, and look at them now. They look fantastic, super lush and healthy, tons of new growth at the top, and I'll bet if we take a look inside the pot at the root system, we're gonna see a lot of good stuff developing. Look at this. Look at the root system developing on this tomato plant. This was a stem 18 days ago, and these roots have emerged. The plant is taking hold. You can tell how healthy it is. It's developing new growth. It's got new flower buds. This plant is super healthy. And had I not known any better, this would have ended up in the compost pile. And this just goes to show the beauty and resilience of tomatoes. So don't give up if this happens to any of your plants. Know with confidence that you can absolutely save the day. This method also works with side shoots that grow in the tomato's armpits, commonly referred to as suckers. If you remove these on purpose or by accident, just pop them into a pot or even just straight into your garden bed. Give them a little support and boom, free tomato plant. Now it's just a matter of time before these plants are ready to go into the garden. In fact, I could probably transplant them right now. And they're only just about a week behind the other tomato plants. Those went into the ground over the weekend. I hope this was helpful information and gave you the confidence to try to save your tomato plants next time they suffer an accident. You can definitely bring them back with some quick action, support, and care. Happy growing.